Good day, everyone, especially to you, Dr. Ria Kibir. I'm Hannah Breath Alperacho from BSHM3A. So in this video, I'm gonna discuss about the Chapter 7 that talks about the laws on regulating transportation establishment. So for the learning objectives, we have the first one is to identify the laws affecting the transportation sector, identify the rights of passengers of commercial transportation, and the third one is to explain the relevance of these laws to the promotion of tourism in the industry. So for the topic outline, we have the law on common carriers, responsibility of common carriers, liabilities of common carriers for the acts of employees and strangers, nature of airline bus and shipping tickets, registration of aircraft, authority to operate, registration of land transportation, and also the accreditation of transportation vehicles by the Department of Tourism, standard requirements of tourists in land transportation vehicles, water transport vessels, and also for the tourist air transport. And also we have the seatbelt law, law on transportation of animals, law on importations of vehicles, public service laws, and also the traffic laws. So for this, before we start, we also have this stimulation. From the time the wheel was invented, man began to travel and explore different corners of the world. In modern times, with the invention of first flying machine and marine vessel, tourism started to grow at a fast pace. Transportation as a business carriers, with it not only high returns but great responsibility for many lives, are at stake in this risky sector of tourism. So for the introduction, the Philippines has become one of the most promising tourist destinations due to the warm hospitality of Filipinos and the wide variety of tourist attractions across the country. However, one major challenge in promoting inbound tourism is the issue of safety and security, especially in particularly in transportation. The country is home to some of the world's best transportation professionals, including seafarers, pilots, flight attendants, cruise ship crew members, aircraft mechanics, and drivers. Despite this, the Philippines has also recorded some of the worst transportation disasters and accidents, which greatly affect public perception and the tourism industry. Because the transportation plays a vital role in tourism, understanding the laws and regulations that govern the SIC sector is essential. That's why in this chapter, I will discuss the different transportation laws that impact tourism and how they help ensure safe and efficient travel for both local and foreign visitors. Our first topic is the law on common carriers. The transportation sector in the Philippines is primarily governed by the Civil Code of the Philippines. Article 1766 states that if the Civil Code does not specifically regulate certain matters, the Code of Commerce and other special laws will apply. According to Article 1732, common carriers are persons, corporations, firms, or associations engaged in the business of carrying or transporting passengers or goods or both by land, water, or air for compensation, offering their services to the public. So for the discussion of this law, a common carrier is any business that provides transportation services to the public for a fee. Example include bus companies, airlines, shipping lines, and taxi services. They have a legal obligation to ensure the safety of passengers and goods. In contrast, a private carrier does not only offer transportation services to the public, but only transport goods in specific cases based on private agreement. An example is a company that hires a truck to transport its products. Both the Civil Code and the Code of Commerce distinguish between contracts of carriage of passengers, which is where the carrier is responsible for ensuring passenger safety, and the second one is the contracts of carriage of goods, where the carrier must deliver goods in good condition. The rights and responsibilities of carriers vary depending on the type of contract, ensuring that both passengers and transported goods are protected by law. So for the application of the law, one example is imagine in a bus company that operates daily routes between Manila and Baguio. Since it serves the public and charges fares, it is considered a common carrier. If a passenger is injured due to a reckless driver or a mechanical failure, the company is legally responsible under the Civil Code. The law states that common carriers must exercise extraordinary diligence in ensuring passenger safety. If the company fails to prove that the accident was unavoidable or not due to negligence, they will be held liable for damages. And let's go to the nature of the contract of carriage. The definition of a contract of carriage is a contract of carriage is a legal agreement between a passenger and a transportation provider, such as an airline, bus company, or shipping line. It involves the commitment of the carrier to transport passengers or goods safely in exchange for payment. And the unique nature of passenger transport contract is that, unlike ordinary business contracts, the contract of carriage creates a special relationship between the carrier and the public. The transportation provider actively invites people to use its services, promising comfort, safety, and efficiency. Because of this, carriers have a public duty in order to ensure the well-being of their passengers. And for the responsibility of common carriers, for the legal basis, the responsibility of common carriers is outlined in the Civil Code of the Philippines, requiring them to exercise extraordinary diligence in ensuring the safety of both passengers and goods. In Article 1733, common carriers from the nature of their business and for reasons of public safety are bound to observe extraordinary diligence in the vigilance over the goods and for the safety of the passengers transported by them, and according to all the circumstances of each cases. So in this article, it means that common carriers or the transportation companies have really a big responsibility because their job affects the public, and this law requires them that to be extremely careful in handling both passengers and goods, and they must take extra measures to ensure that their passengers are safe during travel and that goods arrive in good condition. Their level of care should be based on the situation of each case. And the second article is the Article 1755. A common carrier is bound to carry the passenger safely as far as human care and foresight can provide, using the utmost diligence of very cautious persons with due regard for all circumstances. So in this article, it emphasizes that common carriers must ensure passenger safety. They should do everything humanly possible to protect passengers from harm. And this means that they must be extremely cautious, just like how a very careful person would act in situations where safety is at risk. And they must also consider all possible dangers and take the necessary precautions. And the next article is the Article 1756. In case of death of or injuries to passengers, common carriers are presumed to have been at fault or to have acted negligently unless they prove that they observe extraordinary diligence as prescribed in Articles 1733 and 1755. So in this article, if a passenger gets injured or dies while using a common carrier, the law assumes that the transportation company was at fault, and this means that the company is automatically considered responsible unless it can prove that it took all necessary precautions and followed the strict safety measures mentioned in Articles 1733 and 1755. And the burden of proof is on the common carrier, meaning they must show evidence that they were not negligent. And the next article is the Article 1757. The responsibility of a common carrier for the safety of passengers as required in Articles 1733 cannot be dispensed with or lessened by stipulation by the posting of notices, by statements on tickets, or otherwise. So in this article, it means that a common carrier cannot avoid responsibility for passenger safety by using contracts, tickets, signs, or other means. Like for example, that even if a bus company prints a notice saying we are not responsible for accidents, but this law does not allow them to escape liability because no agreement or statement can reduce or remove their legal duty to protect passengers. So these laws ensures that transportation companies must prioritize passenger safety and are held accountable for any lapses in caution and responsibility. And let's go to the liabilities of common carriers for the acts of employees and strangers. So for the legal basis, we have the Article 1759. Article 1759, common carriers are liable for the death or injuries to passengers through the negligence or willful acts of the former's employees, although such employees may have acted beyond the scope of their authority or in violation of the orders of the common carriers. This liability of the common carriers does not cease upon proof that they exercise the diligence of a good father of a family in the selection and supervision of their employees. So this article states that common carriers such as buses, trains, ships, and airlines are responsible if a passenger is injured or dies because of the negligence or carelessness or intentional wrongdoing of their employees. Even if an employee disobeys company rules or acts beyond their assigned job, the transportation company is still responsible for what happens. Like for example, that if a bus driver drives recklessly and causes an accident, the bus company cannot simply say, the driver was not following our rules, so we are not responsible. But the company will still be accountable. So for the discussion of this article is that it needs, the company will still be held accountable when there is death or injuries to the passengers. So it needs an hiring qualified employees where a bus company cannot claim it acted diligently just because the driver has a professional license. So the company must also check the driver's experience and service record, access driving skills through exams and trainings, conduct background checks for a past by violations, and also supervising employees properly, where employees must only set rules and guidelines but also ensure compliance. And this includes the regular safety training for drivers and staff, strict enforcement of traffic and company policies, continuous monitoring and evaluation of employee performance, and also lastly, ensuring also the vehicle and vessel safety. A bus company must maintain vehicles in good condition in order to prevent accidents. And also, a shipping company must ensure its vessels are seaworthy, properly equipped, and operated by a competent crew. And let's go to the enforcement of liability of common carriers and causes, and these are the causes of action for enforcement of liability. Because common carriers can be held liable for incidents involving passengers or pedestrians through the following actions. And the first one is the breach of contract of carriage or culpa contractual. Because whereas if the death or injury of a passenger occurs, the victim may file a case of breach of contract of carriage or culpa contractual against the carrier owner. And the second one is the criminal and civil actions for injuries to strangers. If a stranger or pedestrian is injured, a criminal complaint can be filed against the driver for reckless imprudence resulting in homicide or damage to property. And also a civil suit may also be filed against both the driver and common carrier under culpa acquisitiva or quasi delict based on negligence. And for the damages recoverable from common carriers, in action based on culpa contractual or culpa acquisitiva, the following damages may be recoverable. And the first one is actual damages. This includes expenses like hospitalization, medical bills, and other costs related to the industry. And the second one is the unrealized profits. If the victim is unable to continue their career or job, unrealized profits are calculated based on their net yearly income adjusted by mortality tables. And the third one is moral damages. It can be awarded in cases of both or severe mental anguish caused to the victim's ear. If the carrier acted in fraud or bad faith, moral damages may be higher. And the fourth one is the exemplary damages, awarded to correct the behavior of the common carrier and serves as a public sample. If the carrier acted in a reckless or oppressive manner, exemplary damages may be applied because in Article 2231, it allows exemplary damages in cases of gross negligence. And the fifth one is the death indemnity. This is a fixed amount awarded for the death of a passenger as determined by current court rulings. And the sixth one is the attorney's fee. If exemplary damages are awarded, the victim can recover attorney's fees under Article 2008 of the Civil Code, like for example in Metro Manila Transit Corporation versus Court of Appeals, the court awarded 50,000 in attorney's fees. And the last one is the nominal damages. If moral damages cannot be proven, nominal damages may be awarded to the indemnified the victim for any loss. And the amount of nominal damages is decided by the court based on the circumstances of the case. And these are the actions that would be based on culpa contractual or culpa achilliana, and where the damages may be recoverable. And the next one is the nature of airline, bus, and shipping tickets. The law treats airline, bus, and shipping tickets as contracts of adhesion, meaning that the terms and the conditions of the contracts are drafted solely by the carrier. The passenger's role is simply to accept the ticket, and often with little to no opportunity to negotiate terms. While airline, bus, and shipping tickets are legally enforceable as contracts of adhesion, the law ensures that passengers are protected from unfair stipulations, and that the passenger implicitly consents to the terms by accepting the ticket, but courts maintain the authority to scrutinize these terms and protect the passenger's rights when necessary. So let's go to the regulation of the transportation business. The Department of Transportation, or the DOTR, is the executive agency responsible for overseeing and regulating transportation and communication system in the Philippines. Under the Administrative Code of 1987, the DOTR has a critical role in ensuring the development and maintenance of safe, efficient, and reliable transportation networks. And this includes overseeing transportation services, coordinating public and private transport systems, and setting policies that regulate the entire sector from land, sea, and air transportation to communications and postal services. It works to provide the public with accessible and dependable transportation services, contributing to national economic growth and development. So this DOTR is authorized to plan, regulate, and implement key projects that will ensure the optimal performance of transportation networks. And this includes the power to decide the viability of specific projects, such as constructing transportation, infrastructure, or introducing new services. This department also holds the technical expertise and authority to determine whether these projects align with national goals and public interest. And for the regulation of air transportation business, air transportation in the Philippines is governed by a well-established legal regulatory framework that has evolved over time to address the needs of the growing aviation industry. And in the first one, let's go to the historical development of air transport regulation. So, the regulation of air transport began on Legislative Act number 3909, passed by the Philippine Legislature on November 20, 1931, which created an office under the Department of Commerce and Communications. This office was specifically tasked with overseeing aviation matters, including the enforcement of rules and regulations concerning commercial and private flying. And the second one is the Civil Aeronautics Act, or on Republic Act number 776-1952. On June 20, 1952, the Civil Aeronautics Act, Republic Act number 776, was enacted. This law served as a comprehensive policy to regulate air transportation, particularly commercial aviation, and to promote the safety and reliability of air travel. The Civil Aeronautics Board, or the CAB, was established under this act, and with the mandate to supervise the economic aspects of civil aviation. The CAB was also granted general oversight of air carriers, their property rights, and franchise. Because the CAB also governs the issuance of permits and licenses for air carriers, including foreign carriers operating within Philippine airspace, with the approval of the President of the Philippines. And the third one is the Air Transportation Office, or the ATO. In 1987, Executive Order number 125 was enacted, which created the Air Transportation Office, or the ATO. The ATO was tasked with the technical and operational regulations of civil aviation. It oversees the safety and technical standards of the air transport sector, which includes the inspection and registration of aircraft and the operations of airports. The ATO also has the authority to manage national airports, air navigation facilities, and other infrastructure needed to ensure the smooth operation of air transportation in the country. And it also works closely with the Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines, which was created in 2008 to replace the ATO, while expanding its mandate to include the authority to oversee civil aviation safety and security. And the last one is the regulatory framework for air transport operators. To operate as a domestic air carrier in the Philippines, an entity must meet the following qualification as specified under Republic Act number 1776. The regulation of air transport is crucial not only for securing safe and efficient travel, but also for fostering the environment and encourages competition among domestic carriers and regulates the pricing and service standards that the public depends on. Air transportation in the Philippines is highly regulated by both the CAB and the ATO, and this agency ensures that air travel within the country is safe, efficient, and accessible to the public, while maintaining strict oversight over airlines operation, fares, and safety standards. So let's go to the registration of aircraft. We have this law that only aircraft owned by or leased to our citizen or citizens of the Philippines and which are not registered under the laws of any foreign country may be eligible for registration with the Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines. And this provision ensures that the ownership of aircraft registered in the Philippines aligns with the country's legal and economic interests, promoting national control over the aviation industry. So for the discussion of this law, it says that the certificate of registration of an aircraft issued by the Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines is conclusive proof of ownership except in cases where the ownership is disputed in legal proceedings. In situations where the aircraft is under lease, the certificate of registration may reflect to the lessee of the operator of the aircraft, but it does not necessarily confer full ownership rights to the lessee. The ownership rights remain with the lessor unless otherwise legally proven. The requirement that the aircraft must not be registered in a foreign country is particularly significant because it emphasizes national jurisdiction over Philippine-registered aircraft. If an aircraft were registered in another country, it would fall under the jurisdiction of that foreign nation's aviation laws, potentially complicating matters of safety, maintenance, and regulatory compliances. Also, we have the regulation of the shipping industry. We have the Maritime Industry Authority or the MARINA. The Maritime Industry Authority was established on June 1, 1974 by the Presidential Decree number 474 to regulate and develop the maritime industry in the Philippines. Initially, MARINA was placed under the office of the President, but later in 1979, it was attached on the Department of Transportation and Communication, which provided better coordination for maritime policies and programs. The government agencies in the Philippines are responsible for regulating and promoting the country's maritime industry. It oversees shipping, shipbuildings, and training and certification of seafarers. And we also have here the functions of the Marina in Republic Act number 9295 on May 3, 2004. As outlined in Republic Act number 9295, which further defined and expanded Marina's mandate, the authority is tasked with several critical functions to ensure the development and regulation of domestic shipping services. And these functions include the following. The first one is the vessel registration, because Marina is responsible for the registration of vessels in the Philippines, and this process ensures that all ships operating within the country are documented, properly identified, and meet necessary legal requirements to function in domestic waters. And the second one is the issuance of certificates of public convenience, because Marina issues certificates of public convenience to domestic ship operators, allowing them to provide specific maritime services such as passenger or cargo transport. The CPC can also be extended or amended, but it remains valid for no more than 25 years. And the third one is the modification, suspension, or revocation of certificates. Marina has the authority to modify, suspend, and revoke any certificate, license, and accreditation it has issued to domestic ship operator. And this power is exercised through due process, which includes a notice and hearing to ensure fair evaluation. And the fourth one is the setting operational routes and areas. Marinas determines and prescribes the routes, zones, and areas of operations for domestic ship operators, and it ensures that ships operate in designated areas necessary for efficient transportation such as coastal routes or regions in need of development. Also, we have the ensuring provision of services in essential areas, setting safety standards for vessels, compliance with safety standards is also the inspection of vessels, ensuring financial stability of ship operators, impact assessment of new services, enforcing compliance with safety regulation, stabilizing passenger and freight rates, adjudicating complaints, imposing penalties for non-compliance, investigating compliance and violations, and lastly, the issuance of rules and regulations. Because we know that Marina issues the necessary rules and regulations to implement the Provisions Act number 9295, and these regulations are designed to ensure the smooth operation of the domestic shipping industry and to maintain safety and service standards. So let's go to the authority to operate in the shipping industry. Granting of franchises and certificate. The Maritime Industry Authority is also the regulatory body responsible for granting franchises and certificates to domestic ship owners or operators in the Philippines domestic trade. No franchise certificate or any other form of authorization awarded by Marina for the carriage of cargo or passengers or both in the domestic trade shall be granted except for domestic ship owners or operators. So these certificates authorize the carriage of the passengers or cargo or both in Philippine territorial waters. The first one is the domestic ship owners or operators. A domestic ship owner or operator is defined as a Philippine citizen, a commercial partnership wholly owned by Filipinos, or a corporation where at least 60% of the capital is owned by Filipinos. To engage in the business of domestic shipping, these entities must be authorized by Marina. The second one is the foreign vessels. Foreign vessels wishing to engage in trade within Philippine waters may be granted in a special permit by Marina. This is only applicable when no domestic vessels are available or suitable for the required service, and when the public interest justifies the need for a foreign vessel's involvement. And let's go to the regulation of land transportation. We have here the historical context, where the concept of land transportation in the Philippines has evolved over time. Early Filipinos used animals for the transportation of people and goods, while the means of transportation were simple compared to the modern-day vehicles. They were governed by the informal laws that specified which animals were suitable for specific purposes. With the advance of technology and infrastructure, modern land transportation has become highly regulated with two key agencies in charge. And we have the Land Transportation Office or LTO, and also we have the Land Transportation Franchising and Regulatory Board or the LTFRB. The Land Transportation Office or the LTO is where it's primarily responsible for the registration and operation of motorcycle or vehicles in the country. It also handles the licensing of the drivers, vehicle owners, and dealers. The LTO also ensures that all motor vehicles meet requirements set under the Clean Air Act of 1999, mandating emission testing as a prerequisite for vehicle registration. So for the Land Transportation and Franchising and Regulatory Board or the LTFRB, the LTFRB plays a crucial role in regulating the land transportation industry, particularly in public transport services provided by the motorized vehicles. The LTFRB holds significant authority in regulating the land transportation industry, including the setting of rates for public services. However, this authority cannot be delegated to individual common carriers or transport operators, ensuring that public interest and fair competitions are safeguarded in the process of rate setting. So the combination of the LTO and the LTFRB ensures that land transportation in the Philippines is regulated, efficient, and safe for all users. Through their various functions, both agencies contribute to the development of and improvement of the land transportation system in the country. And the next one is the accreditation of transportation vehicles by the Department of Tourism. And this involves the minimum requirements for the operation, establishment, and maintenance of transportation vehicles in order to be accredited by the Department of Tourism. Accreditation by the Department of Tourism, although not mandatory in nature, but it increases the marketability of transportation vehicle. And let's go to the standard requirements for tourist land transportation vehicles. To ensure tourist transport vehicles meet safety, comfort, and regulatory standards, the following detailed requirements must be fulfilled. The first one is the roadworthiness. It means that all tourist transport vehicles must undergo an inspection by a team from the Department of Tourism to confirm they meet the necessary standards for road safety, mechanical condition, and operational readiness. Only vehicles that have passed this inspection will be allowed to operate. And the second one is the age limits of vehicles, especially in bus, coaster, tourist car, or luxury cars. And the third one is the safety features and comfort. For the left-hand drive, all tourist transport vehicles must be left-hand drive for ease of operation in countries where the left-hand side of the road is used. And also, for the air conditioning, where vehicles must be equipped with the adequate air conditioning to ensure the comfort of passengers, especially in tropical climates. And also, we have the fire extinguisher, where at least one portable fire extinguisher must be installed on each vehicle. We also have the public address system, first aid kit and emergency supplies, and also the comfortable seating. And also, we have the maintenance and infrastructure, where maintenance depots and parking and P&P clearance. For the standard requirements for tourist water transport vessels, we have the passenger amenities, where we have these amenities or facilities like restrooms, toiletries, refreshment area, dining area, promenade area, and also the baggage storage. And also we have the standard requirements in the crew and staff, where crew and staff must be well trained and courteous staff, where also the crew and staff have the uniforms, where staff must wear clean professional uniforms at all times to maintain a level of professionalism and to make sure it easier for passenger to identify staff members. And also the crew and staff must also be an English proficiency, where all frontline staff must have a good command of English, enable them to communicate effectively with both local and international passengers. And lastly, the last standard is the safety and lighting, because because we have here the adequate lighting and the life-saving equipment. These are so important, especially the life-saving equipment, because the vessel must have an adequate supply of life-saving devices such as life jackets, lifeboats, and other necessary safety equipment in compliance with maritime safety regulations. So for the standard requirements of tourist air transport, where it needs a safety equipment, where all aircraft used for tourist transport must be equipped with adequate life-saving devices such as life vest, oxygen mask, and emergency exits, and communication equipment to ensure the safety of passengers in case of an emergency. And these requirements must be in accordance with the Air Transportation Office or the ATO standards and regulations. So for the documents required for accreditation to operate as a tourist transport operator, we have here the general documents. The first one is the mayor's permit or the municipal license. The second one is the business name certificate or the articles of incorporation and bylaws, because for corporations or partnerships, a certified true copy of business registration documents from the Securities and Exchange Commissions must be provided. And also, it needs the proof of ownership or lease contract for maintenance and depots and garages. And also the employee information where the list of all employees detailing their designation, nationalities, and home addresses must be certified under oath by the general manager or president of the operator's company. And also, it needs the other documents or the additional documents may be required by the Department of Tourism in order to ensure the compliance with all regulations. For the general needs or the documents required for the land transport, it needs the LTFRB certificate of franchise, where it needs a copy of the LTFRB certificate authorizing the operator to provide tourist car or bus services. And also an approved transportation rates, where a copy of the rates for transportation services as approved by the LTFRB. And also it needs the vehicle photographs, where pictures of the vehicles showing the side, back, and front views with the company's name and logo clearly visible on the rear and sides. And for the water transport documents required, it needs the certificate of public convenience and necessity, also the approved transportation rates, vessel photographs, and also the routes and schedules, where documentation of the routes and schedules that the vessel will serve, ensuring that the operator follows a defined and approved itinerary. And lastly, for the air transport documents required is the certificate of public convenience and necessity, approved transportation rates, aircraft photographs, operations and maintenance personnel list, and also the routes and flight schedules of the aircraft. So all these requirements in their detailed form ensure that tourist transport operators in the Philippines meet necessary safety, operational, and regulatory standards for land, water, and air transport, safeguarding the well-being of passengers and maintaining the integrity of the transport sector. And let's go to the accreditation and motorized boat or bangka engaged in tourism activities and services. Motorized boats or bangkas or is engaged in tourism activities are critical in providing water transport and related services, especially in areas where water travel is necessary for sightseeing or recreational activities. These boats must meet specific standards and requirements to be accredited for tourism operations, ensuring passenger safety, comfort, and overall operational compliances. So for the definition of motorized boat or bangka for tourism, so as I mentioned earlier that a motorized boat or bangka as defined for the tourism services refers to any vessels for a gross tonnage or the GRT of 20 or below, primarily engaged in providing water transport services including sightseeing and other water-related tourism activities. And so for the standards for boat or bangka construction and maintenance, the motorized boat or bangka must be made from good quality materials that comply with the regulations set by the Maritime Industry Authority or the Marina. And these materials must ensure the boat's durability, safety, and longevity of the operational conditions. And for the required equipment of the boat or bangka, the following equipment is essential for safety and compliance of the Marina and Philippine Merchant Marine Rules and Regulation or the PMMRR. The first one is the life-saving equipment, where the boat must be equipped with sufficient life-saving devices such as life vest, lifeboats, and life rings for each passenger. And also, it needs a firefighting equipment, life vest, first aid kit, lighting and radio equipment, waste disposal, briefing or notices. And also, the boat or bangka needs a crew requirements where the boatmen, at least two boatmen must be on board at all times, and the boatmen must be well trained, efficient in managing the boat's operations, courteous to passengers, ensuring a comfortable and pleasant travel experience. And for the qualification, the boatmen should possess the necessary work permits, licenses from the marina, and must wear the identification card and clean uniforms as prescribed of the DOT. For the accreditation eligibility for operators, to be eligible for accreditation as a motorized boat or bangka operator in tourism services, applicants must meet the following criteria. The first one is the single proprietorship, partnership, and also the corporation. And it also required the documents for accreditation. So the following documents are required for the accreditation application process. So for the single proprietorship, where it needs the business name certificate, duly registered of the BI Bureau of Trade Regulation and Consumer Protection, or the Department of Trade and Industry. It also needs the mayor's permit, resolution from the board of directors, and the list of officers and employees. And lastly, the marina specific documentation. I add this because it needs also the Marina Certificate of Inspection, Certificate of Public Convenience, compulsory passenger insurance, rates and routes, and other documents. So all of these accreditation standards are designed to guarantee that motorized boats and bangka engaged in tourism services provide a safe, comfortable, and professional experience for all passengers. By following these detailed regulations, operators help ensure the sustainability and safety of the tourism sector, promoting responsible and high-quality services. And let's go to the seatbelt law in RAU 8750. The Seatbelt Law on Republic Act No. 8750 was enacted in 1999 with the primary aim of reducing injuries and fatalities caused by road accidents in the Philippines. It mandates the use of seatbelts for drivers and front seat passengers of all motor vehicles, whether public or private, to ensure their safety and protection. So for the detailed provisions of this article or law, the first one is the mandatory use of seatbelts, where drivers and front seat passengers of public vehicles are required to wear seatbelts whenever the vehicle is in motion, regardless of whether the vehicle is on road or thoroughfare. The driver of the public vehicle is obligated to inform the front seat passengers to wear their seatbelts immediately after boarding. And also, rear seat passengers are encouraged but not required to wear seatbelts. However, minors and children in the back seat must be properly restrained. The second one is the prohibited acts and penalties. It is unlawful for any person to import, cause the importation, and operate a motor vehicle that does not have operational seatbelts. If a vehicle is new, seatbelt compliance is mandatory for registration. And the third one is it also needs the children's safety. Children under the age of 6 years are prohibited from sitting in the front seat of any running vehicle. This is to ensure their safety, as the front seat, particularly when airbag deploy, poses the significant risk to young children. And the fourth one is the operational requirements for public vehicles, where public vehicles such as taxis, buses, and jeepneys must have properly functioning seatbelts for all front seat passengers. If passengers are not wearing them, the driver can face penalties. And let's go to the law on transportation of animals on Republic Act 8485. The Animal Welfare Act, Republic Act No. 8485, also known as the Animal Welfare Act of 1998. It mandates that animals, including pets, wildlife, and livestock, must be transported under safe, clean, and humane conditions. It covers land, air, and water transportation and provides guidelines for the treatment and welfare of animals in transit. For the key provisions of the law of this law on transportation of animals, the law requires a public transport operators to provide clean and safe facilities for transporting animals. This includes the proper ventilation, bedding, and enough space to prevent overcrowding, because animals must also be given food and water, especially in trips longer than 12 hours or during extreme weather conditions. Any act of cruelty, such as overcrowding or improper confinement, is strictly prohibited. Transporting certain animals also requires written permits from the Bureau of Animal Industry, which are only issued after confirming that health and safety standards are met. Additionally, animals must have also health certificates, including rabies vaccinations for pets. Agricultural animals may need extra disease testing, such as Coggins test for horses and ASF clearance for foot and mouth disease. Animals entering the Philippines from other countries must go through quarantine and health checks to prevent the spread of diseases. And let's go to the law on importation of vehicles. Various laws govern the importation of vehicles into the Philippines, including the Subic Bay Freeport Zone, which encourages the entry of goods and services with minimal government restrictions. On Republic Act number 7227, Based Conversion and Development Act, it promotes the free flow of goods and investment, especially in freeport zones such as Subic Bay, by reducing government intervention. And the second one is this Executive Order number 156. It prohibits the importation of used motor vehicles except for vehicles within freeport zones, vehicle owned by returning residents and immigrants, special purpose vehicles, and also the diplomatic vehicles. The third one is the Republic Act number 6537, the Anti-Carnapping Act. It requires the collector of customs to report the arrival of imported vehicles to the Land Transportation Office, including the vehicle details like make, type, engine number, and chassis number. Also, the Philippine Clean Air Act, or the RA 8749, where new motor vehicles imported into the Philippines must meet the emission standards set by the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. And the last one is the Seatbelt Law. And let's go to the Public Service Law, or the Certificate of Public Convenience. In the Philippines, public service is defined broadly and includes any person, business, or entity that provides services for compensation to the general public. These services are typically offered to a general clientele that may be permanent, transient, or accidental. Public services encompass a range of transportation modes and industries such as buses, trains, subways, motor vehicles, steamboats or steamships, ferries, and watercraft, and also the shipyards. These services are expected to be provided in a manner that serves the general public, prioritizing convenience and public safety. However, unless exempted, businesses wishing to offer public service must be granted a certificate of public convenience or a certificate of public convenience and necessity before they can operate. So, we also have the traffic laws under Republic Act number 4136, Motor Vehicle Registration and Operation. In Republic Act number 4136, enacted on June 20, 1964, it serves as a compilation laws that regulate traffic rules and regulations in the Philippines. It covers a wide range of topics, from vehicle registration to the operation and maintenance of motor vehicles. So below are some of the key highlights of the law, focusing on registration of motor vehicles and general traffic rules. Rules on registration of motor vehicles. The first one is the mandatory registration for motor vehicles. No motor vehicle is allowed to be used or operated on public highways unless it is properly registered with the LTO. And also for the exception for tourists, where tourists bringing their own motor vehicles to the Philippines are exempt from registration for up to 90 days of their stay. However, the vehicle must be displayed current foreign number plates. And the third one is the public utility vehicles registration, where such as buses, taxis, and jeepneys must apply for registration along with the certificate of public convenience. And also it needs the driver's license requirements, overloading and riding restrictions, and also the vehicle safety requirement. And the next one is the restriction as to speed. In the screen, you will see the standard km or kilometer per hour depends on the place, where in addition the general speed requirements, where reasonable and prudent speed, endangering lives or property, stop within assured clear distance ahead, where the speed of the vehicle should also allow the driver to stop the vehicle within the assured clear distance ahead, which is the distance in which the driver can safely bring the vehicle to a stop. And also it needs the specific speed limits, because in Republic Act number 4136 does not explicitly specify speed limits for all roads. It sets general guidelines for how vehicles should be operated in various conditions, and local authorities may impose specific speed limits depending on the area, road type, and volume of traffic. Because, for example, if a residential or business districts may have lower speed limits to ensure pedestrian safety, and highways may allow faster speeds, but still under the condition that drivers can stop safely within their line of sight. We also have the restrictions on overtaking in passing, where the driver of a vehicle shall not drive to the left side of the center line of a highway in overtaking or passing another vehicle proceeding in the same direction, unless such left side is clearly visible and is free of oncoming traffic for a sufficient distance ahead to permit such overtaking or passing to be made in safety. The next one is the right of way rules, or the right of way. When at intersection, when two vehicles arrive at an intersection from different direction at the same time, the driver on the right has the right of way. This is a general rule of thumb to prevent confusion and accidents at intersection. While within the business or residential districts, pedestrian right of way, where drivers in these areas are required to yield the right of way to pedestrians crossing within the designated crosswalks. And this helps ensure pedestrian safety, especially in busy commercial or residential areas. And also at the through highways or railroad crossings, where it needs to stop before traversing through highways or railroads, where the drivers must stop completely before crossing any through highways or railroad tracks. This is a safety measure to ensure that no accidents occur when crossing potentially hazardous area. So let's go to the parking prohibitions. For the parking prohibitions, drivers are prohibited from parking or stopping their vehicles in the following places. And these are the within the intersection, where a parking within an intersection obstructs the flow of traffic and poses a risk to drivers and pedestrians. Also on a crosswalk, because parking on a crosswalk interferes with pedestrians' ability to safely across the street. And also within 6 meters of an intersection, within 4 meters of a fire station or fire hydrants, in front of private driveways, on the roadway side of another parked vehicles, and also where official signs prohibit parking. Driving or parking on sidewalks. It is prohibited to drive or park a vehicle on any sidewalk, path, or alley not intended for vehicular traffic. Sidewalks are primarily designed for pedestrians, and driving or park on them compromises pedestrian safety and disrupts the flow of foot traffic. Also, driving and substance intake, alcohol and narcotics prohibition. No person shall drive a motor vehicle while under the influence of alcohol or narcotics. This includes illegal drugs or medications that impair judgment and reaction times, making driving dangerous for the individual and other on the road. Law enforcement officers have the authority to conduct sobriety tests if they suspect a driver is under the influence. And also the obstruction of traffic. Drivers should avoid driving in such a manner that it obstructs or impedes the passage of other vehicles. Like for example, while unloading passengers or cargo, drivers should not block the free flow of traffic, as this can cause congestion and accidents. And also we have here the duty of driver during an accident. In accident reporting, in the event of an accident, the driver must show their driver's license and provide their true name and address. And also, they should provide the owner's details if the driver is not the owner of the vehicle involved. So when it comes to leaving the scene, a driver involved in an accident must not leave the scene without rendering assistance except under specific circumstances. If leaving is necessary to avoid serious harm from persons at the scene, if the driver reports the incident in the nearest law enforcement officer, and if the driver needs to summon medical help such as calling for a doctor or emergency services. So let's go to the laws regulating tricycles, pedicabs, calesas, and other related provisions under the Local Government Code of 1991. In case of regulating tricycles, pedicabs, and calesas, the local government unit concerned through the city or municipality has the power to regulate the same virtue of the local government code. Regulations of tricycles by the city or municipality shall be subject to the guidelines prescribed by the Department of Transportation and Communications. Local government units have the authority to regulate tricycles, pedicabs, and calesas under the Local Government Code of 1991. and these vehicles must adhere to guidelines set by the Department of Transportation and Communications for safety and proper operation. Also, limited access highways and non-motorized vehicles. Motorcycles, tricycles, and bicycles are prohibited from operating on limited access highways under Executive Order 546 and Republic Act No. 2000, or Limited Access Highway Act. These vehicles are not designed for high-speed roads, and their presence could increase the risk of accidents. Let's go also to the accreditation of Kalesa's driver. A resident Filipino who is at least 18 years of age, especially and mentally fit, physically and mentally fit, and of good moral character may apply for accreditation as Kalesa driver. So to become an accredited Kalesa driver, a Filipino citizen must meet certain criteria, and the first one is the eligibility. The applicant must be at least 18 years old and have the good physical and mental health, and also possess the good moral character. It also needs the application requirements, where it needs the mayor's permit, proof of having passed a Kalesa driver training seminar, and also police clearance and medical certificate. When it comes to the Kalesa standard, we also need the physical appearance, roadworthiness, seating capacity, the first aid kit, and also the horse waste receptacle. And the fourth one is the operational guidelines, where Kalesas should operate within designated tourist areas and should not obstruct the normal flow of traffic. The fare of Kalesa services must be regulated and approved by the local government. So this regulation ensures that safety, convenience, and orderly flow of traffic for all good users, from motor vehicle operators to pedestrians. The rules governing speed limits, overtaking, parking, and operation of special vehicles like Kalasas and pedicabs are integral in maintaining the efficient and secure transportation system. Accidents are carefully regulated with clear duties for drivers to report accidents and assist victims. The accreditation of drivers also ensures that they are well trained and capable of safely operating their vehicles. So let's go down to the conclusion. Transportation is a crucial factor in the success of the tourism industry in the Philippines. While the country is known for its skilled transportation professionals, safety and security concerns continue to impose challenges for inbound tourism. By understanding and implementing transportation laws and regulations, the government and stakeholders can improve travel conditions and enhance public confidence and support the growth of the tourism sector. Ensuring the safe and efficient transportation will not only benefit local and foreign visitors, but also contribute to the overall development of the country's tourism industry. So that would be all for the topic of the Chapter 7 that talks about the laws regulating transportation establishment. And again, I'm Hannah Breath Alprocha from BEST HM3A. Thank you for listening and goodbye.